On behalf of Randstad, I am delighted to invite you here this morning to greet you here for our first Women Powering Business Forum here in the U.S.
If you have a passion for something, it's much easier to be successful.
Those businesses that have women on board far outperform on the bottom line.
Men and women bring different qualities to leadership, and that's why a blend is best. I'm pulling support from, and I'm not going to trade on it.
So I think women are often faced with choices that are really impossible choices, and that's not true. This morning, I thought to get the conversation started, we'd start with kind of a why should we bother question. So it's you know, I think it's a well-recognized fact. I don't think I'm surprising anybody here when I say that men are still far more present in top leadership positions than women. What are the benefits of having more women in these roles? Stacey, would you like to start?
Sure. In companies in particular, which is where I happen to be, as opposed to not-for-profit and so forth. First of all, it's part of reflecting your marketplace in your leadership, and having that diversity of perspective at the leadership level of the company, I think, makes a huge difference. If you look at consumer-focused businesses rather than B2Bs, as an example, the statistics are something like women do 80% of the buying. They make the buying decisions for families, as an example. So if you aren't thinking about issues, if your company's not addressing the marketplace with that women's perspective in mind, you're absolutely going to fall behind. So I think it's really just that diversity of perceptions that makes it so important. But I think we can take that a step further as well and look at the role and the power of corporations in the world and in society for helping to correct some of the wrongs that are out there. Human rights issues globally, fighting for education for all people, as an example, health care, and those types of services for people globally, where it's amazing today the conditions that people still live under. And I think that having more women perspectives, and frankly just diverse perspectives at the leadership level of any company, will with time influence how much corporations and frankly their financial strength becomes involved in that kind of change in the human rights arena.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Marilyn, what would you like to add?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think the short answer is, if you're just exclusively opportunistic, is that I think we've all seen the studies that Catalyst have done, Financial Times, The Economist, and it shows by far and above those businesses that have women on the boards and women in senior executive roles far outperform on the bottom line than those who do not. And I tend to think it's because women, I believe, and we've done a lot of research on this, have a lot more holistic and multi-dimensional perspectives on problem solving. I think everybody in this room would identify with the fact that we tend to want to engage people in solutioning and bringing folks along. As a result of that, I think we can often develop deeper relationships with employees who then engage on a much more deeper, committed level that really help produce those bottom line results.
Absolutely. And Pamela, I know that this is not an issue that is limited to business. I know in academia it's also a very prevalent issue. What would you like to say?
Well, I would endorse exactly what my colleagues have said, is that, I think more than 50% of the world is actually female. It makes no sense to not have them represented at the highest levels. And I think also, I'm doing a leadership course at Emory, where I'm learning a lot and I have been humbled that I actually have a lot to learn from business. And I have learned a lot. And one thing that's really clear is in the world we're living in now, which is such a globalized world, we have to communicate with people from other countries, different languages, that research has shown that women have exactly the kind of attributes not to get too stereotypical, but what you were saying, that women are good at emotional intelligence, which is, you know, empathizing, trying to understand where someone's coming from, and that in a world where we're having to communicate more and more with people who didn't grow up where one grew up, and, you know, I'm an obvious example, so you can hear from my accent, that having the ability and not being scared to admit that you're wrong, being willing to learn and saying, I don't know all the answers, which I think women tend to be a little less controlling about knowing everything. I think it really makes sense, and absolutely in academia. I mean, and academia faces the same challenges of men tend to get promoted more often, there are fewer women in leadership positions, so we face the same challenges.
Absolutely. All right, Pat.